Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully everybody can see and hear me. If not, pop something in chat and let me know. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And thanks so much for joining us. Oh, and first and foremost, Happy New Year. I'm Chelsea Ty, I'm the Executive Director of TASP, and I will be your moderator for today. This year, first and foremost, I just want to say thanks to the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. With their generous support, we're able to keep this webinar series free again for 2022. So for those who don't know much or anything about TASP, we are the Association for Successful Parenting. We are a nonprofit committed to supporting families where parents have cognitive difficulties, and we work with professionals and parents through training, education, advocacy, and support to ensure that all parents have a chance to parent. So just a few general reminders for a successful webinar. We do this in meeting format on Zoom so that we can be as interactive as possible, but it means that we don't have as much control. So you guys are welcome to mute yourselves so that you don't pop up on camera. You can have your cameras on or your cameras off. We are recording the webinar, so if you prefer not to be on camera and not to be heard, just keep your camera off and keep yourself on mute. We don't provide CEs or slides. But you will get a certificate of participation after the webinar. We will also pop some links in the chat as we go, and you're welcome to share there as well. I do just want to draw your attention. We do have closed captioning if needed. So it should pop up on your screen that says it's live on Zoom with rev.com. And if you look down at the bottom of your screen in the controls, you'll see a closed caption icon. If you hit the little up arrow, there's an option to show subtitles. So just a reminder to myself and to anybody speaking as well, try to speak slowly and clearly so that it can pick up and caption for those who need it. So we do welcome questions. It says during the webinar, but we're actually going to ask, just because of how we're doing this one today, that you hold your questions until the end and then pop them into the chat at the end. We have plenty of time for questions. And so we will make some time available. You can put questions in at the end. As we go, there are going to be some interactive pieces where the presenters will be asking some questions and asking for feedback. So I don't want your questions about the topics to get lost as we go. So just hold your questions you have and pop them into the chat at the end. And if you're having any technical issues, I do suggest popping over to Zoom and seeing if they can support in any way. So just once again, wanted to give another shout out to the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. They have funded us to provide these webinars free for 2022. So we have 4 this year. We will open up registration for the next one, which I believe is in April, probably around the beginning of March. So keep your eye out for that. And thanks again to the Maryland IDD Council for their support. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So today we have Sue Jones and Lindsay Brillhart talking about the concept of good enough parenting and how it impacts parents with IDD. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our presenters. Sue Jones, for the past 35 years, has specialized in supporting parents with intellectual disabilities and is the former department director at the ARC United in Turner Falls, Massachusetts, where she co-developed Positive Parenting, which promotes a variety of comprehensive parenting education support programs to parents with learning differences. Sue founded the New England Coalition for Supporting Parents with Cognitive Challenges and is a principal founder and former co-president of the Association for Successful Parenting, I think that's supposed to say, and currently a senior board member and task trainer. So thanks, Sue, for joining us today. And we also have Lindsay Brillhart. Lindsay is the mom of 2 girls. She's a strong self-advocate for her kids and others, and formerly worked with the ARC of Hamilton County and Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services. She currently resides in Cincinnati, Ohio with her partner, Phil, and 2 kids, Juliana, who's 20, and Sarah, who Lindsay will tell you, I think told me turned 11 yesterday. She was once on the People First of Ohio board, is a Partners in Policy graduate and a graduate of PATHS, providing alternative thinking strategies. In her spare time, she loves to travel and meet new people. And she didn't put in there, but she's also on the executive committee and is co-secretary on the board of TASP. So thanks to Lindsay as well. So bear with me a sec. I'm going to stop sharing my screen while Sue and Lindsay get ready to share their presentation. And I'm just going to share their presentation. I can see it on my screen, but of course I can't find it in my screen share. Hang tight. Okay, so here it is. Let me just share it from the beginning. Okay, Sue, go ahead whenever you're ready.
All right, well, thank you, Chelsea, for that introduction. Lindsay and I are really happy to be here today to talk to all of you about parents with ID and the concept of being good enough parents. Chelsea, you want to move on to the next slide? So these are some of the areas that we're going to be overviewing today, how individuals with IDD have been treated. So we're going to have to look at the past to figure out where we are today and how we can move forward. Number two, we're going to look at assumptions and perceptions as far as systems, providers, families, and community members, previous and current assumptions that are impacting parents with IDD in their parenting journey. Number three, we're going to be looking at some of the research regarding parents with IDD and research around good enough parenting. Number four, how legislation has impacted laws, services, and treatment for individuals with disabilities of all types. And lastly, we're going to be hearing from Lindsay. She's going to be sharing her success story and also on what can happen when parents are given a chance to parent. Want to go back to the next, the slide after that. There is some language that, historic language that is going to be used simply because it's relevant to the particular topic that we're talking about. These are words that are offensive and we no longer use them in our everyday language unless unfortunately we're trying to be offensive, and then unfortunately these words are probably still used. So that would be happening primarily in the historic and the legislation segments. And again, I apologize, but it's relevant to what we're talking about today. Next slide. All right, so history. So the question is, what were parents told to do when they gave birth to a child with an intellectual disability prior to 1967? If you could just write it quickly in the chat, we're going to give it a minute or two, and then either Chelsea or Betsy will read us, obviously not all the answers, but a portion of the answers.
Lots of answers coming through, Sue. Institutionalize, give the baby up, keep them at home or put them in a facility, institutionalize. That seems to be coming up the most.
And that is absolutely correct. Folks were told to institutionalize, to have them be with their own kind. If we could move to the next slide, that would be great. This is actually a slide of Belchertown State School, which is in Massachusetts. You can see where the bathrooms are, not a lot of privacy there. And the other picture is the room where people primarily hung out, and as you can see, really weren't engaged and really didn't have a lot of activities to do. Again, that was Belchertown State School in Massachusetts. I'm going to move to the next slide. This is the one that particularly has some disturbing languages on it. This was the developed as the steps in mental development. This is, quite old, and it begins with the lowest level, which is, I even hate to say the words, but I'm going to say them, idiot, which means someone could barely keep themselves alive. Low grade imbecile, they could do very minimal work. Medium imbecile, they could do some manual work. High grade, complex, and then moron, which means they were able to have some reasoning and judgment skills. Obviously, these are terms that are no longer needed. I was appalled, however, in 1972, I was attending Springfield Technical Community College, and these were the terms that the psychology professor used in class. I was absolutely appalled. However, at that point, the categories had changed to profound, severe, moderately, and mild retarded. And again, we no longer use the word retarded, we use intellectual or developmental disabilities. Next slide. So again, this is some of the history of the movement of where we are today. So in the 1800s, there were no institutions, there were poorhouses. So folks were put in poorhouses. Again, because society did not want to deal with individuals with disabilities, found it too disturbing, did not want to know anything about it. That changed to the actual formation of institutions specifically for individuals with disabilities, intellectual, developmental, mental health issues, special schools all began to be formulated at that time. Again, it was best that they be with their own kind, and they were being protected from society at that point. Moving on into the 60s, people began to question whether or not this is indeed, especially parents, how the treatment and living situations were for their loved ones. Many of them did not really see that a lot of interaction, learning, growing, and development was happening for them. As that began to be discussed, some of the changes that happened in the institutions were, instead of the very large open wards, some folks were moved to smaller housing units. There were the beginnings of some activities, some beginning of learning, a very slow process, but definitely not to the state of where it really needed to be. Next slide. Ongoing, because parents began to question whether or not they should be, putting their babies into institutions and their children, the numbers began to go down and the population went down. So the numbers of institutions began to decline and downsize, and no longer new ones were need to be met. That led into the 70s and 2000s, where parents and self-advocates really began to get their voice, really begin to hear their voice, and begin to notice changes in wanting to have things different for their loved ones. One of the significant things that happened is the 1972, the documentary, the Willowbrook documentary, which really brought national attention to the conditions and treatment, or lack of thereof, for folks that were literally just being placed and warehoused just to be out of society's reach. In 1967, the institutions were beginning to close. I would love to say it was more for humanitarian reasons. I believe it was more for financial reasons, and the humanitarian reasons began to come after that, when there was no need, when things were beginning to look at, instead of keeping people locked up, and people were locked up in institutions, that they could actually be integrated into the community. I worked at Munson Developmental Center, and I was a recreational therapist on a pretty large ward, and I also had a couple of the smaller units. And one of the things that I still find striking today is I would go in and do activities on the unit. I don't believe we ever brought anybody out to the community. Everything was done either on grounds or in the units. And the last of the institutions closed for the quote unquote mentally retarded in California in 2015. So look at how long it took it for really to happen. But now, fortunately, it is over, and services are now community-based residential programs, day programs, family support services, where folks can actually be part and included within their communities and families. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to go to our next topic, which is assumptions and perceptions parents face when living with a disability. And Lindsay and I are going to share this. I'm going to ask the first question, and again, would like you to add some responses into the chat box, and Chelsea can read them to us. And then after that, Lindsay will ask her question, and Chelsea will do the same thing. So question number one, what do some parents feel about people with IDD having children? So if you could write some of those responses, that would be great.
To some responses coming through that they are not able to take care of them, unable to adequately parent, that they shouldn't have children, that parents with IDD might neglect them, can't take proper care. One person said people may feel sympathy, assumption of incompetence, incapable, shouldn't have, can't keep safe, aren't able to take care of them, not equipped to meet basic needs. If they can't take care of themselves, they shouldn't have parents.
Right. So we're hearing the gist of essentially that individuals with IDD, it's commonly felt, should not be able to have children, should not have children because they cannot care for the children, and that the children would not get everything that they need. So now, Lindsay, can you ask the other question?
Yeah, and good afternoon from Ohio. But the question is, what might some parents with IDD feel about services and provider?
So again, if you could just add some of those.
That providers will take their children, that they don't meet their needs or would judge them, scared that they'll take away their kids, distrust, fear, look down upon, providers don't understand, lack of trust, judgment. I see that coming up a lot. Judgment, lack of trust again, may not understand.
So when we're looking at, thank you, Lindsay, for that. So when we're looking at these two sets of these questions, we have shouldn't have kids, they're not going to be able to take care of the kids. And then we have the parents that are feeling, I can't trust them, they're going to take away my kids. When we're putting those two together and we're wanting people to be able to work together, that does not set up a very positive dynamic, as we can see. So these are something that we need to be aware of when we are definitely working and trying to develop that working relationship with parents. I had noticed in the chat, and it was very true, that some people don't even acknowledge that individuals with disabilities are even sexually active, which is, obviously not the case because we have children. One of the things that I think we all need to realize is people are people, whether you have a disability or you don't have a disability, and you want the same things that everybody else does. You want to have connection, you want to have love, you want to have a family, and perhaps you want to have children. And go ahead.
One
Lindsay.
other thing real quick, we did a presentation on our county, but the presentation was about the labels, the retarded and things like that. Yeah. They belong on jars and not on people. And that's the one thing that we teach, that they should be on cans or bottles or everything, but not on the people that we serve and things like that. So
that's really great, Lindsay. I hope everybody can walk away remembering that labels belong on jars and not people. That is excellent. So some of the things that, obviously this can develop a very difficult working relationship and trust issues. And let's look at some of the other barriers at the next slide. So again, we heard some of these that came through: presumption of incompetence, lack of trust in providers, service focus on crisis, fear of loss of children. I think that is probably one of the largest ones when you're having someone coming into your home and you're feeling you're being judged. Limited supports are available, not only limited supports, but lack of appropriate supports. Traditional service systems aren't always successful for parents with some learning challenges. Many of the folks that we provide services for that are living with intellectual disabilities receive some type of benefit, Social Security, SSDI, and they may, that is low income, live in poverty, and have lack of additional resources. Next slide. Now, Lindsay is going to tell us some of her experiences working with individuals where perhaps had some assumptions and perceptions around her qualifications about being a parent. So Lindsay, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thank you. Oh, go back, please. Thank you. Lindsay?
Yeah. Give me one second. All right. We're going to talk about the parent's perspective. So when I've had professional people come to my house, and you know what? Some of the people aren't the best, but the people that come into my house, the first thing that, and we were talking about label jars, not people. The first thing that I ask is anybody that comes to my house doesn't have a badge. If you have a badge, that's the first thing I don't want you to have, because you're not. I want to be treated equally. And when I think of somebody that has a badge, I don't think that you get treated equally sometimes. I mean, the doctors, I know they have to have a badge with them, but you don't have to have it on it. People have lanyards and things like that that you can have on. So that's one of the biggest things. And you know what? The thing about the language, people are still working on that. I am on Facebook, not all the time, but I'm on Facebook a lot. And somebody said something yet the other day about somebody being retarded. And I said, hold on a second. We use different words now. We use the people first language. Would you please next time use the people first language? That is not acceptable. So we are still working on that language part. So I'm glad that we're talking about the parent's perspective, because sometimes when I go into doctor's offices with my Sarah, and that picture in the blue was my Sarah. We get looked at like we're a little bit crazy and things like that. And one of the times we were on a Zoom call, it wasn't Zoom, but something like that. Thank you, Betsy, about people first language. But we went into a Zoom call or something like that with one of the nurses' assistants for the doctors. And I told them that my Sarah, and it was funny the first time, was like a chicken with her head cut off because she likes to run. So she's our monkey. We call her our monkey. And she knows that she's not a monkey, but she likes to climb over us. So she's our monkey. And so I went into the Zoom call and told the doctor's office that she was like running around with a chicken with her head cut off. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, that's what she does. She runs until she doesn't stop. If she didn't have the right resources and things like that for Sarah, she would be like that. So they kept laughing and laughing and laughing. I had to get to headquarters of the place that we went with her to get them to stop, because I didn't think that was fair for my daughter. And my daughter, Sarah, is a nonverbal little girl that is adorable as can be.
Thank you, Lindsay. We really appreciate you sharing that. And it sounds like some of the experiences that we talked about earlier about people not thinking people with disabilities really are able to do what they are needed to do. You have experienced a little bit of that yourself. I really like that you try to set in your own home your own sort of boundaries and rules that you have in your own home. And I'm sure it took you a while to be able to get there and to be able to speak up. That's great. Thank you for sharing.
And I don't know if we have a slide in here, but at the end, maybe we can link our book. There's a book about parents with, there's a book about, from people in Kentucky and all over the United States. There's a book about 200 pages. It's from Amazon. It's about $12, and it's worth it. It's all about our stories, and there's pictures of our kids and things like that.
Right, and you are in that, and Ivanova, another task board member is in it, and you're telling your parenting stories. Great, maybe that's something that either Chelsea or Betsy could put in the chat for folks to look up. And I bought the book and I loved it, and it was really great, Chelsea. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to our next section. So if we can move it, there we go. And we have another question. Research has shown parents with ID are more likely to abuse their children. Yes or no? Let's take a minute or two for folks to go through that.
Everybody is saying no.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I am glad to hear that. And that's what research shows, that no, it is not more likely to be physical abuse or sexual abuse. It is more likely to be benign neglect, things that parents just didn't know that they needed to do or how to do it or where to go to get help to learn how to do it. So that's great. I'm really happy that was responded that well. All right, next slide, please. So we're going to talk about what good enough parenting actually means, and we're going to get it from the Dr. Windicott, who actually is the first person to use that phrase, good enough parenting, in the 1960s. And through the work that he did, he established that children need good enough parenting to survive and to grow, and that basic physical and emotional needs for children need to be provided by parents. One of the other thing is, in other research,
Sue, you
But you're
muted
s-
yourself, I think.
That's what I was going to say.
There we go. How far back do I have to go? How far, when did it?
It was
a little bit.
just for a phrase or two.
All right, so moving on to that again, you don't have to be a good enough parent. I had two kids. I grew up, I had two children, two adult children. I know I was not a perfect parent. I know I made mistakes, and I'm quite sure they will tell you about those mistakes if you had ever the opportunity to ask them. And one of my first parenting experiences, my first child, my son, was born prematurely, and we had to stay in the hospital for a few days until he got up to that 5 pounds. And we were then able to go home, and we were going to have a visiting nurse come the next day. And, you know, to check in, see how we were doing, how we were set up, check his weight, if we had any questions. My late husband and I, we were terrified for that first time that we were alone with that little baby. Constantly, you know, looking, making sure he was okay and safe and sleeping and diapers and feeding and all of that, and was so relieved when the nurse came the next day to give us reassurance that we hadn't done, indeed, we're doing a good job. I know myself, I wondered, could I be a good enough parent to this child? And I think all of us as parents wonder upon one time or another, can we be good enough? As we know, being a parent is a complex, scary, difficult, but wonderful job. And it's something that we all have to, you know, figure out how to do on our own. It's not something that's automatically learned. It's very important that basic needs are covered, such as food, shelter, medical, clothing, emotional support, and how to help our kids learn how to navigate the world as adults. Those are part of the concepts and parts of being a good enough parent. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to look at some research that was done regarding parents with IDD. And some of the earlier research in 1990 and 1994, again, reinforced the whole concept. It's not the parents' specific ability to learn that was interfering with them being good enough parents, but it was the lack of services, the lack of supports, the isolation that they had being parents, and that they face greater risk of losing their children. Fortunately, in 2010, Dr. Feldman and Dr. Unos really established a finding that parents with IQ over 50 can and do learn the needed parenting skills. That, like many typical parents, they need a village, like all of us. I don't think any of us raise a child completely on our own, with natural and or provider supports. And that allows them to strengthen their ability to parent their children. Next slide. So continuing with some research, Dr. Azar from Penn State had created some findings that social workers many times made decisions that were based solely on the diagnosis of the parent. That Beckett and Chambers discovered that yes, parents can be good enough parents, especially given providing supports, either natural or paid supports or a combination of both. And finishing with Dr. Brahm, that innovation and appropriate support can enable parents to care for their children. And the word appropriate is really important. Yes, there are parenting groups out there, wonderful parenting groups, but they may not be appropriate for a parent with an intellectual disability. For example, if you're going to a parenting group that requires a lot of writing and reading, it may not be the right fit. It may not be the right fit for you. So as noted, assumptions come into play and decisions can and have been made on those assumptions with very dire consequences. Research has demonstrated parents with ID can fulfill their role as a good enough parent. And again, thinking outside of the box, sometimes traditional services don't come into play. I'd like to just mention one of the programs that the United Arc has, where I was formerly the director of the program until I retired. And it's called the Transitional Supported Living Program. And this is a program that has an apartment building with six units in it. 5 of them are apartment units for families, and they receive a Massachusetts voucher. It's project-based. It stays with the program. There is staff on site. There is a staff office, though it's not staffed 24 hours a day. And they receive intensive services daily, multiple times a week. They're there for 1 to 3 years, and it's been a very successful program. And I'd like to actually read something from one of our former residents of the program. This was a young man who came to live with us. He left in 2014, so he was one of our beginners in the early 2000s, and he dictated this to me, and I wrote it verbatim, and this was to be used for a part of a presentation for United Way. We were looking for some supplemental funding. Dear United Way people, I came to live in the United Arcs program when I was 21 years old and my son was 18 months old. This was after his mother and I split up and he was removed from her. And I said I wanted him to live with me. I was kind of a jerk at first when I moved in, and I was really pissed off at DCF, that's our child protection, because they said I keep having to do all this stupid stuff over and over until I could show them I could do it right. The program helped me learn how to pay my bills, maintain my apartment, fill out paperwork, step up to be a dad and a man. I never had no family. They never helped me, and the program stood by me in hard times and taught me what I needed to know to be on my own. By the time I left the program, and he left approximately almost close to 4 years later, I had my license, a long-term healthy relationship, a new apartment, and a baby girl on the way. He used to check in with us. He no longer needs to feel the need to check in with us. We occasionally run into each other and other staff run into each other. He has a great job. He's the head chef at a little restaurant that serves breakfast, and his children are thriving and they are thriving and no longer really need the type of supports that he initially needed when he came into our program. And I was always grateful that he was able to do that for us, and it was a wonderful, wonderful letter. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. Very funny guy. Very funny guy. So again, I think one of the things is to allow people to grow at their own pace. And again, nobody is perfect, right? I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. If there's anybody out there who's the perfect parent, please reach out to me and let me know how you did it. Our expectations need to be realistic. They need to be fair. And not that we're not expecting perfection, we're expecting progress. And again, the safety and the welfare of the child, as long as that is taken care of. And again, parents with support is an acceptable way of parenting. Again, we all get supports. It does take the village for all of us to be good enough parents. Okay, we can switch the slide. We're going to talk a little bit about legislation at this point, and we have another question. What state passed the first non-voluntary sterilization law in the United States? If you just write down your guesses, we're going to get back to it further in the presentation, so I'll give you a minute or two.
Sue, do you want to hear answers at this point?
Sure.
Virginia, New York, New Hampshire, Texas. Another Virginia.
Yeah.
Yep, seems to be.
Okay.
Maryland, Indiana.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for those. You can move on to the next slide. So here are some areas that are still being challenging for individuals living with a disability or an intellectual disability. involuntary sterilization, individuals' right to get married, termination of parental rights, violation of ADA and 504. So I'm just going to do a very quick review of what ADA and 504 is, so because it will come up again, and I'm actually going to read this to you. Title II of ADA. Title II of ADA provides that no qualified individuals with a disability shall, by reason of such disability, be excluded from participation or denied benefits of services, programs, activities of a public entity, or be subjected to discrimination by that entity. Title II of ADA applies to services, programs, and activities of all states, local governments throughout the United States, including child welfare and court systems. The service, programs, and activities provided by entities include, but not limited to, investigations, assessments, provisions of in-home services, removal of children from their homes, case planning, service planning, visitation, guardianship, adoption, foster care, and reunification services. Services, programs, and activities also extend to child welfare hearings, custody hearings, and proceedings to terminate parental rights. For Section 504, it's a little bit different. 504 provides that no qualified individuals with disabilities by reason of disability be excluded from participation or denied the benefits of services or programs or activities by any entity receiving federal financial assistance. That's the difference. This is talking that if they're receiving, the entity is receiving the financial assistance, they cannot decline these services. Includes loans, reimbursements from federal agencies, including assistance provided to child welfare agencies and the courts. But unfortunately, this is not truly happening right now. It's still going on. So can we go to the next slide, please? So the answer was Indiana. I noticed that someone had that. And it was actually passed in 1907. And again, I apologize for the language here, that confirmed criminals, idiots, imbeciles, and rapists could be sterilized involuntarily. I am heartbroken to see that individuals with disabilities is also put in that category. And I think that speaks volumes as to what the attitude was for individuals with disabilities in 1907. Between 1920 and 1970, there were over 70,000 involuntary sterilizations were performed. More recently, in 2004, there was a case, it's called Ashley's Treatment, where a 10-year-old girl was given a complete hysterectomy and hormone treatment to prevent her from advancing to adolescence and its complicated physical enhancements that the family thought would be too challenging. So this is still on the books in many states. It is still happening, unfortunately. Next slide, please. Currently, more than 30 states, again, prohibit or restrict individuals with disabilities from marrying. And then there's also the additional complication if you are getting married and you're receiving Social Security, those benefits can come into play and may be reduced or completely taken away, because it's the assumption that the spouse will then assume financial responsibility for the individual. Next slide.
And real quick with that, they are working on a bill. Nothing has passed, but like in the state of Ohio, Phil is my partner. If we were going to get married, my benefits would have been taken away totally. Right. My health and SSI and everything that we get. So it would be on one person's income. So.
Thanks for adding that, Lindsay. All righty. Next slide, please. All right, so what are some things that have happened that have helped to move legislation and some of the court findings? The first one is a report, Rocking the Cradle, and it was done in 2012. And there were many significant findings, but these were two that really stood out to me. One was that removal rates of parents with ID were as high as 80% The range was actually 40 to 80% of removals. And the other one that I found very startling was 2/3 of the current states child welfare laws allow courts to determine a parent unfit solely based on a parent's disability. Simply by the fact that they have a disability, they are assuming they cannot parent, and children get removed simply based on that fact. So Rocking the Cradle was conducted by the National Council on Disability. It found pervasive prejudices for parents with ID and other disabilities. It exposed discrimination against these parents across all services, courts, and just in all states. It was rampant in all states. Next slide. The next thing that happened that was really significant was the Sarah Gordon case, and it happened in 2014. It happened against the Greenfield area DCF office in Massachusetts, what happens to be the area office that I was doing a lot of the work with the families through the department. And it was the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services, and they filed a finding against Mass Department of Children and Families for failing to do these following things. Implementing a reunification plan, identifying and attaining appropriate services, not providing accommodations, not providing meaningful supervised visitation. That was the service area that my agency was contracted to do. We were told we were to do nothing but to sit and to take notes. We weren't allowed to do instructional. We weren't allowed to intervene in any way, unless, of course, the immediate danger to the child. The next one being, don't give the parent an opportunity to enhance, they didn't give the parent an opportunity to enhance parenting skills, such as if they allowed us to do instructional supervised visitation, it would have been a learning process during that time. Violation of human civil rights, and what we had reviewed earlier, actual violations of Title II of the Americans Disability Act and violations of 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We had another task member involved in this case, our own Dr. Nicole Brisson from Sage Haven. She conducted a comprehensive parenting assessment. And as I mentioned, I was involved because my agency was providing the service, and we both ended up testifying during the whole process. Next, you can leave it on that slide. There were some positive things that came out of this. It did take a while. Nothing happened immediately. For example, it took up to 2 years after the baby as a newborn was removed from the mom, Sarah, in the hospital. She was returned to the grandparents, not to the mom, to the grandparents, but the mom does live with the grandparents. We, the United Arc, created a new social worker training that was implemented into their ongoing training for new social workers around working with parents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Some offices are doing better with putting accommodations into service plans, and also cases are remaining a little bit longer than some of the typical cases, given the needs of the parents, and it takes parents a little bit longer to learn and to absorb some information. One of the things that is the most exciting, and we just literally heard about this a couple of weeks ago, is there's been a new element added to the department and for disability, and there's a director that oversees disability issues within the department. And the department, this is again from Massachusetts, has 5 regional offices, and there is a disability liaison in each of those offices. So that definitely is showing some slow progress.
So real quick, somebody was asking how old is Sarah's daughter now?
Okay, I'm going to have to quickly try to do the math. Brother.
This is Betsy here. She was removed in 2012.
Yeah.
So you can do the math. So 6 or 7 at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Bets. Okay, slide 2. Next slide 22, rather. Next slide. There we go. Thank you. So again, this is research that is reinforcing what we have been learning all along, that removal of children is often based primarily on the assumptions of incompetence with the parent ability, and it's not usually the case. It is usually reinforced parents struggle because there's a lack of appropriate and long-term supports. As we know right now, usually everything is crisis driven. Positive support with parents with ID definitely can successfully raise their children. As mentioned, the removals are still happening at this point. Parents with IDD can be good enough parents, and I've had the pleasure of knowing many exceptional parents with IDD. Next slide, please. So this is the last section around legislation, and this is a map that was created by Brandeis University on the current state of legislation supporting parents with intellectual disabilities. So all the sections in white, and there are 23 of them, 23 states, there have been no legislation proposed, nothing's happening there. The green sections have had legislative passed. The 9 have current pending legislation. Massachusetts is in there, and they've had something they've been trying to get across passed for 5 years, hasn't made it all the way through yet. And what they're hoping to do is that a parent with a disability cannot have the child removed based on the fact that they have a disability. It has to be demonstrated that the disability will negatively impact their ability to parent. And then the last are the yellow, and there's 2 of them, and they are in the very close to passing and legislation currently. So there's been advancements, but parents still face significant discrimination, within the family court systems, with child protection systems, and with many times provider and community members. Parents with IDD, once they have a child removed, it's very unlikely and very difficult for them to regain custody of their children. Slide 24 rather. Okay, when parents are given a chance to parent. And now we are actually going to hear from Lindsay, and she's going to be telling us her story. Lindsay, thank you.
And there's my 2 kids. Look at that.
Here they are.
And pretty recent pictures too. The one in the tie-dye is Sarah, and the one next to me is Julie. So you know who they are. Oh, let's talk. Thank you for the comments. And I saw somebody in here from New Zealand. I'm working with a group in Australia to get a lot of this stuff that we have in the United States to them. So I just wanted to tell you that. But let me tell you my story. My story is my partner and I met when my oldest Julie in the black was young. She was in elementary school, but she was really, really young. And we met online, and yeah, you shouldn't meet online, but we met and he came to my house for a week, and he decided that we decided that if we were going to be together for a week, that we thought that we were supposed to be together. And he is from Florida. His family's from Indiana. So he came here and we went to go see his family. Long story short, his sister-in-law has the same birthday as me. So there were lots of connections that happened there. So then we had Sarah. Sarah was 11 yesterday, as Chelsea was saying, and Sarah is the blessing of our life, and so is Juliana. And yes, those pictures are really, really good of them. Sarah does not like to show her face, so what happened is I got involved with TASP because of a sad story, and I have to tell you guys the sad story, but it encouraged me to do better with my parenting. There was a little boy named Marcus Feisel, and it's in the book. They linked the book. So the story about Marcus Feisel, he was a little boy that had autism, and he was burned in a fire because his adopted. He was adopted out. His adopted parents didn't know he had autism at the time. He was 10 years old. They found him on my birthday. There were lots of connections with with me. Like when they found that where the fostering agency was, it was right outside of the complex where I lived. So I could see the news cameras every single night for about 2 weeks. And it was like, okay, I have to do something because my little girl, and he was duct taped and he was burned and all kinds of stuff. And the foster family was my age. So it made me wake up and say, okay, my family needs something like TASP. I have been in TASP for 12 years. Oh my goodness. It doesn't seem like that long. But TASP has encouraged me to speak up for myself. I was one of those people, I am an introvert. You would not think of that, like I like to talk to y'all, but I'm an introvert. I love to talk, but I don't like to talk to everybody. So this is something to get me outside of my box. So when I started with TASP, we started in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado. Actually, hold on a second. Let me back up. The first conference I went to, it was not TASP. There was a different it was a different organization. So we met up and we do email and we do Zoom and things like that. But we met up and we decided we wanted to do the Association for Successful Parenting. Now we have we have a lot of awesome people, and there's Ivanova. Ivanova is from Washington State. She has 2 little girls that are younger than my girls, so it's awesome to see her perspective of things, to see her grow as well as a parent. But we are working now on a lot of brand new stuff for TASP. Not everything is out yet, so I'm not going to put out the spoiler, but there's lots of major things that we are working on. Keep up with all of our websites, keep up with everything. Also, my family has a wraparound service, and I'm going to put a plug because I am going to talk about that at the April, and I don't remember the date right off the top of my head, and it will be on the slide coming up. I'm going to talk about the supports that my daughter Sarah gets at the April webinar with Tom Robinson. And Tom is awesome. He's a man from Canada that so you'll get to hear a lot more about this perspective from that. But I have to tell everybody, I have to tell you all thank you. I would never have gotten to do something like this if it wasn't for my story with Marcus. And how I got from that, I got hooked up with Partners in Policymaking, and I wanted to do something for parents with disabilities. So yeah, our webinars that are coming up. So I got in touch with Partners in Policymaking. Somebody from ARC of Ohio, and I didn't know about ARC of Ohio very much at the time. Somebody from ARC of Ohio got me in touch with Bernadette Irwin and Michelle Forte. She's not on our board anymore, and people like that that aren't on our board anymore. Bernadette is still a senior member, but they got me hooked up to go from Cincinnati, Ohio. I flew from Cincinnati, and I met a lady in Cleveland that wanted something to do with TASP. That lady is not involved in my life anymore, but I'm thankful that I met that lady in Cleveland to go to Washington, D.C. for this conference. Because if I wouldn't have had something like TASP, I wouldn't have seen all the changes that are being made. Oh my goodness, there's changes being made all over the place, and they're all good now. And I'm glad that TASP had the opportunity to help with the Sarah Gordon case. We got to know it through Sue, and now we know it through Betsy. Betsy's a board member. She's helping out with the checking the chat and things like that. You've heard her voice, so I had to tell her thank you. And Chelsea, the executive director, she helps out with everything. Oh my goodness, Chelsea works probably 60 hours, and she gets paid for some of it, but she doesn't get paid for all of it. So you got to give her a lot of the credit too. But there are a lot of successful stories. I wouldn't have had a successful story if I wouldn't have known about tests, I don't think. There are some sad stories that we've heard of, but there are a lot of successful stories. And sometimes you have to weed out some of those sad stories to get the successful stories. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Lindsay, this is Sue. May I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So you sounds like from what you've said that you've been able to use services successfully to help you with your family and your parenting.
And actually, let me just tell you something. The lady that we had that has been the most help to us was an African American lady. And when she first came into my house, I thought, oh my goodness, there's a Black lady coming to my house. Oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? She has opened my eyes majorly. She's not the staff person at my house, but she's somebody that's in my support network that I talk to a lot of the time. So she's opened my eyes about things that are going on.
So you've been able to find services and allow services in your house, and they've been able to work for you. It sounds like, knowing you, Lindsay, you're able to speak up to people and tell them what you need.
Absolutely.
And what you don't want. And do you feel that's something that's important for parents to do?
Absolutely. And I think that they should, if you have a strong self-advocate, we are always looking for somebody for our board. I don't like to put promos out, but we're always looking for a strong self-advocate for our board. I have a Nova and I do a lot of work, but we're always looking for extra self-advocates that want to do stuff for our board. And if you want to get in touch with me, feel free to get in touch with me through Chelsea, through the info at TASP. So if you want to talk to me personally, you might have people that have stories or people that have questions about parenting. I get questions asked all the time. I have no problem answering questions. I have no problem telling you like what a day in my life and things like that are. So feel free to info@achanceparent.net. Feel free to reach out there to get a hold of me. I have no problem telling you about my day. I have no problem telling you, not everything, but I have no problem telling you about my day and about my kids' lives and things like that. Maybe something that you have somebody that you're working with that needs somebody extra to talk to. I have no problem talking to somebody if you have somebody that needs somebody to talk to. I know what it's like. I know what I know what it's like. And it's always good to have that extra support system.
That's wonderful, Lindsay. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you sharing all of that with us. And after all, you know, you've lived the experience and that's how you can teach us. Thank you, Lindsay, very much. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide. So we're going to go on to talk about Dr. Azar and some of her research around, again, lack of services and supports and not the parent's disability that many times leads to the removal by child welfare. Parents can learn the successes they need to be successful parents. And
real quick, sorry, I did want to add something. My family has been with child welfare systems, so I know what that is like too. So if you have somebody going through something like that, there might be tips that I have that I could give somebody. So.
Right. Thank you, Lindsay. And again, it's the barriers of not having appropriate services in place or long-term services in place that really can impact a parent's ability, also more than sometimes their skill level, and them to be able to demonstrate that they can actually be a good enough parent. Could we move to the next slide? So some recommendations by Dr. AZAR, was that child welfare workers receive cross-training, that they have a comprehensive understanding of individuals with disabilities, that collaboration between service systems. In Massachusetts, we're very fortunate. We have a coalition, Massachusetts Coalitions for Supporting Parents with Intellectual Disabilities. And on that coalition right now, we have child protection, we have disability, we have some community providers, and we also have the Children's Trust, which is one of the biggest organizations in Massachusetts, and they're all around every state has one, by the way, around preventing abuse and neglect. And we're all in a coalition together. Next is parenting is influenced, as we mentioned, by many factors. Poverty is a big one. Many of our folks receive limited income. There's a lack of access to services, and again, appropriate services. I think that needs to go hand in hand. You can tell a parent to go to a parenting group, but if they're going to a parenting group and the parenting group is something that they can't relate to or have difficulty understanding, it's not going to help them in any way. And then also lack of opportunities. The last one being having a disability does not make you a bad parent. It simply makes you a parent that may need some additional supports in your learning. That's simply what it means. Prevention versus crisis intervention. When that long-term prevention, making foster care the last, not the first solution for parents that are having some struggles. And that concludes our presentation for today. The next
And actually, real quick,
I skipped a part. I apologize, Lindsay. I skipped a part. I didn't realize this. So
I
again,
did want to add something when you're done. I will let you finish this, and I'll add it when you're done.
thanks, hon. Okay, so changing negative assumptions. What are some things that we can do? Acknowledge parents do the best that they can to parent their children. Again, I've never heard a parent say, I'm going to be the worst parent in the world. That's what I want. I've only heard parents say they want to do the best they can. And again, we're on the same team. We're all working for the same goal, adequate care of the child, that the child have their basic needs taken care of. And that there is such a strong emotional bond between parents and their children. And I'm going to just finish with a little statement that a mom made to me, one of the first moms I worked with in 1985, and she was in the process of reunification with her children through the court process. And I'm paraphrasing, but I had written it down, but she had said to me, and again, the language, because it was done in 1985, they may call me retarded, and they call me stupid, and they call me slow. But hey, that doesn't mean I don't love my kids, because I will do anything for my kids. I just want the best for them. I will do whatever they tell me to do, whatever I have to do, whatever I have to learn to be able to keep my kids with me. And this mom was able to do that. She had all of her children returned. She did not have any more child protection involvement, and they are all adults right now. So now we could go to the next slide.
And actually, real quick, it might be a good thing for me to add. I saw somebody had a question about relationships and things like that, and it kind of has to do with that. But we do I have a Nova, and I do a parenting tip every month. And for 2022, we've started a blog. So keep an eye out for that. If you're not connected to our website, we're going to do one on relationships and things like that. So keep an eye out for things like that. It's on the TASC website. It's free. I just wanted to plug that in too.
Thank you, Lindsay. I was going to bring that up. Lindsay actually just did a great blog on the wonderful joys of being trapped inside the house during the winter months with your kids, and it's got some really great suggestions. And you can go to the TASC website and look that up. So here are some things that we may want to consider when we're moving forward. Parents are a resource, not the problem. Parents know their kids better than anybody else. They can tell you what they like, what they don't like, what they'll eat, what they won't eat. They have more inside information than we do. Interventions need to be focused on building the family strengths rather than on the weaknesses. We don't ignore the weaknesses. We work on the weaknesses, but we build from the strengths. Parents should be part of the learning experience. Parents know how they learn best. So how we may be giving information to parents may not be making sense for them. It's important that we check in with them. Some parents are auditory, some are visual, some are combination. We need to know how and ask, how do you learn best? And most importantly, listen, don't judge, be realistic, and be positive. Lindsay, thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. Yep, you can go back and that to show some of the references that were used during this presentation and around regarding the research. And now we're going to open it up for questions. Thank you, everyone.
And I will let you know, you can ask anything. I will answer anything if you have any questions about my disability or my daughter's disability or anything like that.
Thank you, Lindsay.
So if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat box. We're also going to share a link to a survey. We have a follow-up survey. So the surveys really help both TASP and our funders, the Maryland IDD Council, just see the impact of the webinars and help us also plan for future content. They're completely confidential. Thanks, Betsy. Betsy just threw it in the chat there. So as you're thinking through your questions, please also hit the link to the survey, which will send in a follow-up email after this wraps up as well with your certificate. So we do have some questions coming in. Is there a TASP in Washington State? So TASP, the way TASP works is actually, so we provide training, education, and support through direct trainings and advocacy. We don't do any direct services or supports, but if you email us at info@achancetoparent.net, we can link you up with people in your area or your state who may help. We actually have a number of people on the webinar today from Washington State, so we should be able to link you with somebody who might be able to help you look for what you're looking for, Jen. And I apologize, I have my video off right now because my internet was getting a little bit unstable. So you can email us and we can help direct you to anybody who might be able to help. Just some thanks, very informative. Are there any virtual services available to parents in Washington State? Brittany asked. Again, you're welcome to email us or any other number of people on here today from Washington State. If you know of any, please feel free to pop it into the chat. Yeah, I see Karen responded. She's DCYF's ADA coordinator in Washington State. So again, if you need to get connected with anybody who was on the webinar today, I'll put the link to our email in the chat. You can also find it on our website if you want to email. Karen says contact her. She gets involved in cases involving parents with disabilities. Karen has also been great she's been to all of our trainings and directs people to all of our trainings and to TASP as well. She just put her email in the chat. Kim says, I'm a disability social worker in New Zealand. Happy to link with anyone else in New Zealand who's interested. And I'm going to just take a second and pop our email in the chat in case anybody wants to get linked with anybody from today. And it's
hold on a second, Chelsea.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Kim, if you're not linked up with TASP, why don't you send your email and I would love to get you introduced to the people in Australia. They might need a lot more help than we do in the United States, and I have no problem forwarding your emails to the right people in Australia that I've worked with. I don't work with them a lot, but I've worked with them enough that they know about TASP and things like that. So if you want to drop your email, Australia's making some good progress, and they're getting ready to come out with a book like we did in the United States. So they're doing a lot of work that we're doing here. And I've given them not all the advice, but I've given them some of the advice that we've used and things like that. So I've helped them out some too.
So I see some more just thanks and questions in the chat. Thanks so much, Lindsay. I just started working with an organization in Australia and had a first training with professionals working alongside parents to support appropriately. Just another thanks. There's another link in there for a program in Tampa Bay, Florida, it looks like. Yeah, thanks, Lindsay, and everybody. So
I also wanted to mention that, again, I think my email may be listed, and if not, you could send something to Chelsea, and I'd be happy to, chat with anybody as well, if any questions come up.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Sue. So I just you're welcome to keep putting stuff in chat. I just wanted to draw your attention real quick. Lindsay obviously does a great job of promoting TASK, and there's nothing really more that I need to say. She's phenomenal. But I do just want to thank Sue and Lindsay for being on with us today and sharing, talking about good enough parenting and all the history, the legislative history, what it all means, and what our expectations should be for really any parent. We do, for people who haven't taken part, we have a few trainings that we offer. These are all offered virtually over Zoom. In March, we do have our training around trauma and parents with IDD. I don't have the date in front of me, but it's all on our website. And then we hope soon to have our Working Successfully with Parents with IDD, which is a full day training for professionals. And both of these trainings do have social work CEUs through the National Association of Social Workers for anybody who needs that. We also have, if it's of interest to any organizations, an organizational self-assessment, which is completely free on our website, which helps agencies look at what they're doing, how they're supporting and advocating for parents with IDD, and how they might make improvements in various areas. We also offer a membership. We have a mental health toolkit. We have a blog, as Lindsay talked about. We have a number of things going on. So if you haven't been to our website, if you don't follow us on social media, feel free to do that, and you'll be the first to get updated information about what we do. So like I said a few times, there's our website again, achancetoparent.net. We will send a follow-up email following this, which has the survey link again for anybody who doesn't have a chance to do it now. It really does help us and our funders develop new content, and it's completely anonymous. We will send a companion PDF instead of the slides, which just kind of condenses all the information that Sue and Lindsay shared today so that you have something you can use in your work or share with other people who you work with. And we'll send a certificate of attendance as well. It's just a general one, so you can fill in your name just in case you need proof that you attended today.
Can we make sure the link for the book is in that too?
Yeah, so I can put all, I will go back through chat, and if people ask for specific information that we haven't shared yet, or just to follow up again, I can put that in the follow-up email as well. So I'll go back through chat and just make sure that I didn't miss anything. And again, if we didn't address anything today, yeah, somebody asked if we subscribe to an email list. Yeah, if you go to our homepage, the first thing that pops up is a asking you if you want to join our email list. So if you join the email list, if you follow us on Facebook, those are the first places that we share information about trainings. And I see Betsy said that after I was saying it. So anything else, I'll go through the links, or sorry, the chat, like I said, and put any links in the follow-up email. That'll go out today or tomorrow at the latest. So if you haven't seen it, if you think you missed it for any reason, just email us at the info@achancetoparent.net, which is also on our website if you forget it, and I can make sure you get it directly.
Emerald wants a link to the book.
Yep, I will send, I'll make sure that I put that absolutely in the email so that everybody has it.
Oh,
Wow.
thank you from New Zealand. It was worth
a.m.
getting up at 5 a.m. to listen to us. Thank you so much. Go back and take a nap.
So thank you so much to everybody who joined today. Our next one will be in April. That registration will open probably late February, early March. So keep your eye out for that as well. And thanks again to Sue and Lindsay, and for Betsy helping behind the scenes.
Yes.
Thanks everybody for taking time out today to be with us. And thanks to the Maryland DD Council one more time for funding so that we can keep these free for everybody to join. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
Bye.